All right, I'm gonna start. Today I'm joined by Hayley Moller, rhymes with collar, of Thallo, who was part of the founding team of Thallo, and she's located in Paris. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what Thallo is doing and get to know Hayley. And we're super glad to have her. She was one of our attendees at Refi Summit. And having said that, Hayley, can you talk about the moment when you realized that you needed to get into Web3 and sustainability full time?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, Rex. So I actually have been working in sustainability for a long time. So I think my aha moment might be a little different from others, but I was working in climate change communications, and I found myself leading communications for the UN Climate Action Summit in 2019. Folks might remember that was the moment when Greta Thunberg got up in front of the United Nations and she said, "How dare you," to all of the heads of state. And I was in the room when this happened, and I was really impressed by, her fervor and all of this. And I kind of looked around the room, and people are looking at their phones, kind of staring off into the distance, And I thought, I think all my work in climate comms for the last 8.5 years has been really good, but I think we may have hit a limit in terms of what pledges and commitments can do. And that was the point that I decided I needed to move out of climate change communications and move more squarely into decarbonization. And so for me, that meant I left Washington, D.C., where I was living at the time, and moved to France to get my MBA at INSEAD. And INSEAD was really where I started to learn more about Web3 and blockchain. I met the rest of the founding team at Thallo, and they said, "We have this crazy idea of bringing carbon credits on chain. What do you think about that?" And I said, I don't really know what on chain means, but let's have a conversation. So that was when I started getting involved in it and spent, I guess it's been a year and a half or a little bit more that I've been in the kind of Web3 and climate tech space.
Has anything surprised you about the process of trying to put carbons on chain?
Yeah, lots has surprised me. I think one of the things that has surprised me the most is the sort of visceral response that people have when you mention blockchain. And it doesn't matter kind of what their actual perception is, whether it's positive or negative, but you get a big reaction when you say, "Oh, I work in climate tech and blockchain," or "I work in carbon credits and Web3." It kind of catches people off guard, and their initial reaction is, "Well, those two things don't go together." So I think kind of interpreting the perception that people have of Web3 and of what that community looks like and of what that technology means has been really interesting to get into as somebody coming from the sustainability side in particular.
Do you think it's better to hide blockchain as a topic and obscure it and just say it's just infrastructure, or do you think it's better to say explain what it is? What's your approach?
Well, in the interest of transparency, which I know is something that a lot of us in this community care a lot about, I think it's important to be upfront about what technology you're using. I don't think that means that having, a wallet needs to be at the primary interface of the product, for instance. So at Thallo, our interface is very kind of Web 2 friendly, and you don't have to mess around with kind of traditional web, what you would normally think of as Web 3 infrastructure in order to access the platform. But I do find that people are curious and do want to know more, and they're intrigued by understanding what blockchain can bring to the carbon credit space and what the benefits might be. So I would say it's always important to mention it. And more often than not, people are curious, but I don't think it needs to be the very, very first thing you say necessarily, but I wouldn't hide it.
Have you seen attitudes shifting over the last year and a half, or what are the trends, I suppose, that you've seen?
Yeah, I would say so. I think the number of friends that I have and folks that I know kind of outside of the Web3 space who are really intrigued, and they say, "Hey, can we have a call? I want to know more. I want to understand this. I've been put on a project for my work, or my boss mentioned this, and I want to sound smart in responding," has really increased. And I remember about a year ago, I did I don't know if folks are familiar with it, but it's called Unit Masters, and it's basically a blockchain literacy course. And it's an 8-week course, and you basically meet with groups of people, and you watch videos, and you have speakers, and you read materials, and it's trying to get folks up to speed with being able to speak about blockchain. And one of the homework assignments from this course was to explain to somebody in 3 minutes or less what blockchain is. And so I did that with my younger brother and his partner. And it was about 7 a.m. in Oregon where they live. And so they're sitting there, haven't had their coffee yet. And I said, okay, do you guys have any idea how blockchain works and what it is? And they said, no, I don't think so. And so I gave my best attempt at a 3-minute kind of pitch for what blockchain is and why it's relevant. And I don't know that it was my best ever pitch, but what I will say is they are definitely, both of them are more interested in the topic now, and more likely to ask a follow-up question if somebody brings it up in conversation. So I think the mainstream interest and curiosity around blockchain, around Web3, even around crypto is definitely growing. And people are starting to get to the point where they say, am I missing out if I don't know? Maybe I should know a little bit more.
I think I feel like there needs to be more spaces where the different people come together and have these conversations from the different backgrounds. And historically, like, I hate to say it, but I think it was literally Thanksgiving and Christmas. Like, that was the only time when like the blockchain people got a chance to like get together with the non-blockchain people and be like, hey, grandma, buy this NFT. It's going to be great. And
my grandma is not buying NFTs. I will tell you that. Yeah, it is. I totally agree. I think the refi space is unique in that that the folks in this space acknowledge that there need to be more voices, and there need to be more different backgrounds represented, and more kind of tolerance and invitation for folks who maybe disagree or aren't kind of, Bitcoin maximalists, for instance. I don't see that so much in the broader Web3 community, but also refi is sort of my home. So I know it best. But I have been encouraged by how much people are interested in having those conversations. I think we have a long way to go in terms of getting people who have different types of backgrounds, like me, coming from sustainability, into the refi space. But I think at least the topic is sort of on the table.
I'm seeing people coming from many different directions. Like, I come from silicon and IoT, and my interest is, oh, well, we need to have this data that's like all observed. And then when I saw like the carbon market and the sustainability market, I'm like, well, IoT is how you track all this stuff. And then I was just talking with Brianna Walsh from Renium and John Pierre from GeoTree, and they both come from like finance background, like carbon trading, commodity trading. And they're like, well, we have all this, we were like trading all this using all these like different data sources. And we're like, how do we unify this? So we fell into it that way. And then you're coming in from sustainability, and there's other people coming in from just like Web3 software development. So it's like all these people like have a place, I think, and it all has to come together to make the end-to-end vision sort of happen.
Agree. And one of the things that came up in my MBA that I did was a bunch of research has been done on diverse teams. And I know, diversity can be kind of like a word that people don't want to talk about, or they want to talk about too much. But the research shows that teams where people are different from each other and have like real differences, whether those are physical notable differences, or those are, differences in background, but those teams end up doing better. However, it takes more time. It takes like an initial period where the team doesn't agree, and it's hard, and people are arguing with each other, people are disengaging and need to be invited back in. So I think that's sort of what I hoped that refi really embraces, is that discomfort at the beginning, so that we can build for the long term and have a really resilient community in the long term, knowing it's going to be a little uncomfortable at the start.
I think some of the most interesting people, like that, people that are literally from the environments that are most impacted, are not in a lot of these conversations. So it's like, how do you get the, and like one nice thing about like Cosmoverse in Colombia and Refi Barachara and like the DevCon Bogota, It's like that shipped a whole ton of refi people and Web3 people down to South America. And I saw like on Twitter in real time people being like exposed to children begging on the street. And like I just saw people getting these kind of like cognitive dissonance wake up calls of like, oh, like, like the area where I was building was awfully nice compared to like the reality on the ground. And I think Africa is like, Africa and South America, India, clearly like they have some of the most impacted by climate change. Yet, like I think the biggest disconnect between many of the hands-on builders from those environments, there hasn't been much cross pollination, and I'm
Yeah.
hoping that changes in a major way in the future.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually was just speaking with somebody who's based in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil, and he was saying exactly the same thing. He was saying, nobody's explaining carbon credits to these indigenous communities that I work with, let alone blockchain. So trying to explain why tokenization of carbon credits might have advantages is so far away from the lived reality on the ground. So I do think it's something that we should think about how to address. And there are certainly, as you mentioned, the events in Colombia, and there's Marcelo from Refi Spring, for instance, is working on frontline communities and on the ground engagement. But I think it's so important to keep looking back at what is the North Star. What are you actually building this for? Sustainability is not a corporate word. Sustainability really comes down to land and people and the health of communities. And I think that's something that it's easy to lose sight of. And it's good to have the conversations to try to ground that and also to try to connect with people who might be able to inform worldviews.
It seems like there's been a significant increase in pushback on ESG. Is this something you've been monitoring?
Yes, there's definitely been some pushback. I think one important distinction is the distinction between ESG and sustainability. I think ESG often gets used in capital markets situations, and often gets used to refer to investments and more kind of. It's a financial term essentially. Whereas I think of sustainability as being more of a term that's tied to, if you're looking at corporates, at their holistic strategy. So most firms that I worked with in the past in communications wouldn't talk about their ESG strategy. They would talk about their sustainability strategy. And that would encompass things like using less water in their operations, or making sure that the communities that they operated in were being taken care of, or had access to improved lives and that kind of thing. Whereas ESG strategy is more like, what is your portfolio doing? So I think most of the backlash that we're seeing about ESG is really tied to capital markets and tied to investment strategies, and whether or not ESG investment strategies perform better or have the impact that they claim they have, and all of this. Whereas I think on the sustainability side, there are more companies than ever that are committing to net zero goals, for instance. That was an Accenture report that just came out this week that looked at how many companies have made commitments, new net zero commitments, or intermediate net zero or intermediate targets on the way to net zero in this downturn, in this market downturn that we've seen. And the numbers are increasing, and they're accelerating. So I would push back a little bit that there's been backlash against sustainability as a core tenet of business operations. There has been a pushback on ESG as an investment strategy.
Okay. So what is Thallo?
Yes. So Thallo is a company, and we've got folks who have backgrounds in sustainability like me, and also who have backgrounds in blockchain and entrepreneurship and financial sector as well. And we're building an exchange, and what we're calling this is the Thallo Carbon Exchange. Now, this exchange is for trading carbon credits. It allows businesses and individuals to buy, trade, and retire carbon credits, and allows project developers to add their carbon credits to the platform in order to sell those carbon credits directly to end buyers. So the whole thing is based on blockchain, and that's for a number of reasons, mainly around transparency and traceability, so that both the end buyers know exactly what they're getting and where their money is going, and also so that the sellers of the carbon credits are able to see the full kind of life cycle of the credits that they're generating. Also for traceability. And then for more efficiency. So by cutting out the middlemen in the carbon markets, which are the intermediaries, Thallo just did a research report that looked at how much money the intermediaries are capturing in the middle of the market. And it's a really significant amount. It's about a third of the value of a carbon credit. And so by cutting out those middlemen, we're able to have more efficient transactions, faster transactions. You cut out these value sapping intermediaries in the middle of the market. And then finally, for programmability. So at Thallo, we are making it so that carbon credits will be able to, we're working on a royalties scheme. So this is basically so that if a carbon credit doesn't get retired immediately, but rather gets traded, then some of the revenues from that trade will go back to the original project developer. So I would say there's a lot of platforms that are doing kind of similar things, and a lot of folks, want to know, how are we different from some of these other platforms? I would say there's a few key ways. First, we are project developer first. So we are really focused on talking to, as we were discussing, those communities on the ground who are actually own the land and are generating the carbon credits. We're very, very focused on those communities and making sure that they are well served by our platform. We also have an emphasis on high quality. So we use a non-commoditized approach for our carbon credits. So rather than having pools where all the carbon credits are sort of tossed into a pool together, we keep carbon credits directly linked to the underlying registry so that they retain their attributes like sustainable development goals and the vintages and the geographies that they're tied to. And that makes it so that the buyer can really set their own parameters around what they're interested in buying. Unlike normal exchanges like CBL or something, there's no minimum order. So individuals are able to participate and not just big corporates. And then I would say, unlike some other marketplaces, we connect the buyer directly to the seller with, a really minimal fee. So that's a little bit about Thallo and a little bit about what we're doing. We're really hoping to be additive in the overall carbon markets.
So one of the things that we're hoping to do with Refi Summit the first time was this came out of I was basically working at NVIDIA, and I was like, I need to get into Web3. And then there's nothing happening in Seattle in terms of events that I was aware of in Web3. So we put together this Refi Summit. And I think at the time COVID was ending. So a lot of people that had only ever met each other online were able to meet in person for the first time. Yeah. So that phase of the refi movement is very important. I mean, the last 9 months, people already forgot that people couldn't meet each other as COVID. But so it's everybody's traveling around, meeting each other, building networks, having the conversations, having the arguments. And I feel like next year is going to be much, much, much more hands-on builder focused, where I'm I feel like, as you said, you're focused on the project developer. It's going to be focused on attracting these kinds of developers. And I also think we're going to, I think we're going to be in a build phase where it's all these refi projects. Maybe they're going to build tools, SDKs, APIs, marketplaces that are programmatically something that I, as a developer from a Web 2 climate tech company or a Web 2 company, can plug into. So is that something you're seeing? Do you think you're going to be targeting software developers increasingly?
Yeah, interesting. I think we are in that build phase right now, especially with the crypto market downturn. The projects that I'm seeing that are kind of heads down and building right now are really quality projects, because they have to be in order to be thriving when there's not as much money in the crypto markets as there was 9 months ago. So I think that period is happening now. What I'm hoping is that when the markets turn around, that all of these amazing organizations that have been building are going to be able to really flourish and really be ready for that moment. So I don't know that software developers are really going to be an entity that we're necessarily going to be heavily recruiting for. We have a really good tech team in-house already. I do think that there will be lots of opportunities for folks who have those skills to come into the refi space. But I also think there's lots of room for people with other types of skills to come into the refi space, like people who have finance skills or marketing skills or operation skills. So I don't know that it would be a particular focus on software developers. And when I say our focus is on project developers, I mean like carbon project developers.
So what are the barriers that a carbon project developer faces in integrating with a platform like Thallo? Like what are the opportunities to accelerate and make their lives easier?
Well, hopefully they don't face a lot of barriers to integrating with our platform, because that's kind of the hope of the platform. There's no fees to onboard. There's no minimum amount of carbon credits you can onboard. You have access to these royalties. There's no fee to the project developer for the transactions to happen. That's just charged on the buy side. So I think it's quite an attractive and hopefully low lift. It's designed to be a low lift onboarding process for them. What I do think is going to continue to be a barrier that needs to be overcome on all sides of Web3 is around the sort of blockchain literacy piece of it and the Web3 literacy piece of it. And I think it's a responsibility of those who are in Web3 now to invite in others and to make it easy for folks who are outside of this space to understand why they might be interested in getting into it and lower some of those barriers. I genuinely think that the process of setting up a crypto wallet and figuring out how to buy crypto and put money in the wallet, put cryptocurrency into your wallet or buy an NFT or anything like that is a pretty onerous process. And you have to really want to do it in order to make it work. I mean, the first time I bought crypto, I started to buy crypto and I probably did that 5 times before I actually bought any crypto. And I had to ask somebody who was in the space already. And I was super embarrassed, like, hey, what wallet should I get? Is this fine? So I think there is a barrier there. There's a sense that stuff is shady because it's in Web3. And I think it's up to us to dispel those rumors and say, look, there's really good projects. This is just a technology in the end, right? And using that technology can be used for good or for evil. You can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use a hammer to hit somebody in the head with, right? It's not the technology that is good or bad, it's how it's used. And so for refi, I think it's on us to say, you may have a bad or negative association with cryptocurrency, but here's why the association with blockchain technology should not necessarily be a negative one. It can be used for really positive purposes.
I remember just even last December and like the early part of the year, just how active like anti-crypto people were. Like you saw these people from Google, you saw them just it's a scam. I saw people all day long writing blogs and posts. And it's gotten awfully quiet after Reddit just did like 10 million in or whatever in like NFT sales, and then Meta just adopted it for Instagram. And like Twitter is, Elon Musk and Twitter are actively talking about Web3 all the time. And like it's getting quieter and quieter on the Web3 is a scam front, And I don't know if that's gonna to stick, but it seems like things are, maybe there's a little bit of capitulation going on where it's like, actually, this seems to be making a lot of headway. I don't know if it's permanent, but it seems to have made some progress.
Yeah, that might be the case. I don't know if the drivers you identified are the drivers of that, though. Like, I think there are fewer people saying crypto is a scam because a lot of the scam projects in crypto fell apart with the market downturn. So there actually are fewer scams in crypto, and so it's less likely somebody's going to have a direct experience with a scammy project.
I just saw Do Kwon on Twitter, and he's hiring now. He's back and he's hiring.
Interesting. Yeah, people have very short memories.
Oh my God, this space. So for an audience of refi projects, like what do you do? How do you go integrate with Thallo like tomorrow if you want to? Like what's the action I can take if I go to thallo.io? What can I do?
Yeah, sorry, here's my cat coming through here. I would say we are super keen on partnering with other refi projects. We do have a number of partners. So we have other refi projects typically are innovation partners with us. And what that means is we can do co-marketing together, and we can also go in on potential joint business opportunities together. I think the types of projects that we want to partner with are projects that kind of share our values, that we are trying to build something that is additive, and we are trying to, not throw everything out and start from zero, but rather learn from what has been done before in the carbon markets, and then improve upon that, make it better, figure out where we can be solutions agents. So one of the areas that we're really working to solve right now, I mentioned this report that we did, which was looking at project developers and the carbon project developers and the challenges that they face. And two of the big barriers were around project verification delays, which is largely a registry's question, and a validation verification body's question. And the second area was around financing, and specifically forward financing. So one of the things I think Web3 can be really great for is coming up with new forward financing models for carbon project developers. So there's a number of protocols and projects that are working in this space already, like Solid World DAO and Ivy Protocol and CarbonFi and a couple of others. And so anybody who's trying to solve that problem, we're super happy to collaborate with. But more broadly, I think there's a big need for, like I was saying, education and just general kind of welcoming folks into this space. And I think any refi project that is excited about trying to bring new people in is one that we want to partner with. So you can go on the website, there's a partnerships tab, and you can request to partner with us, or just reach out to me. I'm on Twitter, Telegram, all the usual places.
Very cool. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for stopping by. And maybe in the future, we'll see Greta Thunberg showing up in Web3 too. What do you think?
You never know, I mean, I think she's a pretty discerning person. And as far as I can tell, discerning people are in Web3. So let's see.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll put some links to where you can learn more about Hayley, and go check out Thallo. And thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Bye.